Our second goal is to expose the works of darkness, starting with entertainment, a device the devil uses to control your mind and soul.
Wow.
Why? Because these are the subjects that are interwoven into a lot of your entertainment. Don't let them burn. This is Chris from Don't Let Them Burn. Welcome to our program. Remember to hit the like button and share this. This is our review or our thoughts, our decoding of Captain Marvel. The captain that's not a Marvel, because the movie was kind of trash. Tonight, Kevin and I will be decoding this movie for you and letting you know what's the secrets to this character and the whole lore behind this feminist icon. And this is a Christian movie review, so if you don't like spoilers, guess what? It's time to back out. And if you are easily offended, it's time to back out. Kevin, what's going on?
Hey, good to be here with you again, Chris. And as you said, there's a lot in this movie. Some of it veiled to an extent that, you know, with the knowledge of the comics, you can bring it up. But some of it not so veiled as Marvel has been known to do in the past. So, you know, it follows the typical formula.
Right, and this movie has been basically surrounded by controversy, dealing with what, you know, some of the things that the stars in movies have said regarding white males or males in general. Brie Larson has said that she doesn't want, I think she says something like she doesn't want white males reviewing a movie or something like that. Anyway, you could check out those controversies. It's all over the place. And some people are calling it nonsense, that it's not true, but it is. You go look up the quotes and you'll find out. I didn't really want to delve into that tonight. I just wanted to jump into the movie. Disney, Marvel, basically approached Brie Larson to make a feminist film. So if you're for feminism, this is for you. Those of us that are on the right track of history know that feminism is not something that you should be teaching your women or males. It helps to breed soy boys and soft men that think they're doing good for the plight of humanity, but in the end, it would just help to destroy the family. And, you know, feminists want to take down the male patriarchy. But anyway, what are some of the things that you noticed in this movie to start with?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I noticed, even in the comics, they've rewritten the story, and the origin is similar to the Captain Marvel, as he was known, the Kree warrior that came down to Earth. Of course, he was male, and as you said, this whole movie was a rewrite, a feminine rewrite of a male Marvel character. But he came down to the Earth, and he was actually going to retrieve a Kree sentry that had fought against the Fantastic Four. The Kree first appeared in the Fantastic Four 65, of course, created by our friends Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and more about Jack Kirby in a moment. But he came down, and it was sort of a suicide mission. Jan-Rog was in the comics, and he had a love for Captain Marvel, the woman that loved him, and he sent him down here, and he was wanting him to die. And originally, they had to have a pill to even breathe, because on their planet, they breathe nitrogen. They couldn't breathe the oxygen. So he was just trying to deprive him of air, you know, let him die here. And then there was, of course, the jet accident, or the scientist Lawson. Of course, he was a male as well. So all that was rewritten, and the character known in comics as Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, becomes Captain Marvel. So the whole story is actually a rewrite, and I guess Marvel did it originally in the comics, you know, to attract female readers. But as you said, the powers that be have grabbed onto it and pushing a feminine agenda.
Right, and Disney's known for pushing the feminist agenda, especially today, and that's for another show. But also Marvel, because they're owned by Disney, is also pushing the same agenda, even in the physical comic books, and fans are really getting upset about it. And there's all sorts of controversy circulating around this issue in the real world. Now, Carol Danvers, or Miss Marvel, has been made from a male to a female to well, it was a black female, then to back to a male again, then to a female again, and then back to a male again, and now it's back to a female, but she still wasn't a feminist. And then they rewrote her story again in the comic books to be a feminist, and that's the iteration that you're getting today. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, they've erased the whole history of Captain Marvel, and as you said, it was all sort of scrambled there, and there was the controversy with DC's Shazam, which was called Captain Marvel. So it's all been, you have to have sort of a playbook to unwind all that goes on with the different iterations. But as you noticed, as you said, she's now called Captain Marvel, and I guess that jumped out to me. But the next thing was the Supreme Intelligence, the AI of the Kree, and of course, as I mentioned with Justice League, when I see something like that, it just screams Jack Kirby and his esoteric background, and that's what it is. He was the creator of the Supreme Intelligence. And we saw it there in the movie as it was pictured as the scientist Lawson in the movie that she was seeing. But in the comics, it was really pictured, it looked like this big green blob, a head, and it had tentacles on it. And that was, the Kree had programmed this intelligence. They wanted to make a cosmic cube or a tesseract to rival what the Skrulls had, and it sort of took a mind of its own. They kept feeding it with their great minds of their philosophers, their generals, their great leaders. They kept feeding the intelligence of that into this Supreme Intelligence. But the picture, like I said, that picture of that green blob and those tentacles, and I've mentioned this before, but that is the picture of AI, and how Jack Kirby knew that in the 1960s just blows me away. I mean, he had some contact with something to know that the AI would be pictured in the future as a creature with tentacles. As I said, it had a head and it had sort of the tentacles coming out of its head. But I wanted to read a little bit of this article as that. We see artificial intelligence is pictured by its proponents today as an octopus. And I'm reading this article. It says 5 reasons why the octopus inspires artificial intelligence. It talks about the neural networks and its crunching of data, but it says octopuses are brilliant, perhaps even sentient. And that means we could learn a lot from studying how they think. And the first reason they may be sentient or be able to have feelings, it says there's a long-running debate in the marine biology community over whether octopuses and other cephalopods are sentient beings, but even if they aren't fully conscious, they are intelligent enough to warrant some scientists to think they are. So there's your first connection with the octopus and artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. It says they have personalities. Many people that work with octopus claim that the animal has a personality. Some are shy, some are outgoing, and you have thieves and problem solvers. They interact with their surroundings. This article says we want AI that can enter a new situation and figure out how to handle it without needing our guidance. And octopuses might be even better than we are at adapting their environment. Depending on the type of octopus you're working with, they can use adaptive camouflage, burrow, and even squeeze themselves through impossibly tight spaces. Each of these adaptations require a high degree of intelligence because they are reactive, controlled changes in the physiology. And then it goes on to say they're expressive. Octopuses and other animals have personality because they express their thoughts and feelings. And then 5, they have memories. So once again, it just blows me away that the creators of these comics in the 1960s pictured that AI, almost as an octopus. And that's what we have the technology world describing AI as today. Sorry, I didn't mean to hit the rabbit trail, Chris, but I couldn't help it.
No, it's important, and I believe from what I've heard, they've had mechanisms, or what I should say, a network that was close to not what we have today, but in the idea in these military operations already, right? back then. And plus, this idea of the supreme intelligence AI has been around longer than Jack Kirby's time. And these people that were thinking about this idea, as like the Greeks with the automaton, the living robots, this idea goes far back. And they were obviously talking to entities, whether you want to call them demons or fallen angels. We've been given knowledge. Some people go back to the book of Enoch, but, I don't want to go too far into that. But, this is what we're dealing with today as a society that's getting ready to be plunged into the idea of the hive mind, whether it's by mind control, the whole population following the media, the propaganda, whatever, or us having these neural networks, brain chips, where we do talk to or interact globally with this intelligence, this artificial intelligence, or many artificial intelligences that many companies are building today, but Google is the main one. Everything you described there, dealing with the octopus and dealing with how they're feeding the information, they want the entity to be autonomous, and not just autonomous, but self-aware.
Yes.
And that's just where all of this is going. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're saying this to you because it's an idea that's been placed in your entertainment, the comic books, the sci-fi movies, and all this junk. Even in some of the modern detective shows, has ideas like this. There's one called Intelligence, and that was a movie about a TV show about a intelligence officer that had a brain chip in his head, and he would basically make crime scenes out of the images that he would gain from the internet in real time. So anyway, so this supreme intelligence in this movie. Automatically, I knew that it was artificial intelligence. No one had to tell me. I didn't have to get a description. I automatically knew based on the neural link that they had Carol Danvers hooked up to her head. Go ahead.
Yeah, and you're exact. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head, especially with the hive mind. And, really, so that's what social media today, that is I believe that's the foundation or the test run, if you will, of the hive mind is social media platforms today, whether it be Twitter, whether it be Facebook. I guess most of the teenagers are on Snapchat. Those are the beginnings of the hive mind and how they're whole people groups.
Yeah.
And they spent how much money was spent, during the election on social media trying to stir the election, and sway the people, and even artificial intelligence was used. I mean, Barack Obama made, he made full use of analytics and artificial intelligence in his bid, and so did Clinton, but she just didn't know how to use the data.
Yeah.
So as good as President Obama did.
Yeah. And Obama is the one that launched the BRAIN Initiative anyway. Anyone can look that up. You'll see what I'm talking about. Look up the BRAIN Initiative and what they plan on doing. They want to map the brain and see how it works and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But there's another thing. I watched, I think probably about 3 episodes of the new season of American Gods. It's despicable, disgusting, but I had to look at it, and it's good. It's a good thing I looked at it because there's one of the new gods, which you're familiar with this term, Kevin, the new gods. That's Jack Kirby all the way. But this is by Neil Gaiman, another comic book writer. And he writes novels, but he also helps through do graphic novels for these comic book companies. Anyway, there's one of the new gods is called Media, and Media explained how everyone's looking, and she got a link with the god Argus, which is a god that has all sorts of eyes all over his body, and he can see everything. That was equated to our surveillance system. So Media linked up with our surveillance system, and everyone was taking a look, and she was learning about everyone's life.
Oh, wow.
As the god of entertainment. Go ahead.
Wow. That is. mind blowing right there that they're bringing that out. But yeah,
Mhm.
the artificial intelligence for sure is one of the main things that grabbed me about the whole movie. So I didn't know how far you wanted to go with that, but
No, it's good. I think we covered it well. Um, and well, this movie as it went from the Kree planet Kala to Earth, we see that when the Skrulls, who are supposed to be bad guys, Skrulls are supposed to be bad guys, and they have her basically imprisoned in this thing to scan her brain, this machine, this mechanism, and you start seeing flashbacks of her past where she's basically they're giving us subliminal messages about male figures that were in her life, that were, and all of the instances male authoritative figures were in her life. It was some sort of tragic thing, a tragic incident. So I just wanted to point out that little subliminal aspect right there. Go ahead.
right. And that steps into I guess the next thing I want to discuss as far as the storyline of the movie, and as far as as you mentioned, the oppression, and as she felt, and we see, and as I said, this is veiled, but in Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, there's a picture of the female deity, and what's call that Ishtar, and of course we see it in the Babylonian legends as Semiramis or Isis in the Egyptian mythos, whatever you want to give the name, but the female deity is there. And as far as in the movie, as she's falling there in that ship and falls, of course, into the Blockbuster store there, and I sent you a photo there of a series of Marvel called, and they had Miss Marvel there on the cover of the storyline, and it was called "The Woman Who Fell to Earth."
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that is Ishtar. Of course, the legend has it that she fell to, or she told her followers that she fell to Earth in an egg there in the Euphrates River. So we have the deity falling to Earth, and as Miss Marvel and one of her incarnations in the comics, her suit was complete with a lightning bolt, similar to Shazam in DC Comics. But one of the overarching storylines in Marvel, and this appears in the Avengers number 200, and I remember reading this as a kid, but and really didn't grasp what the story was saying. I just thought, man, this is a strange story. I really, it wasn't really what I was used to with the Avengers. And I sent you the article about it that, right now that, the writers of the Avengers, they're taking some flack over this issue. It's sort of controversial what happened in it. Somebody's saying they don't know how it got past the Comics Code Authority, but what we have in this picture is Miss Marvel in the issues preceding was she was found out she was pregnant, and she didn't know who the father was, and I think it started maybe in issue 197 and sort of a build up to 200 where she has a baby, and this baby is all of a sudden it's aging at an accelerated rate, and then we start seeing all these things going on, dinosaurs appearing. There's I guess a hole punched in the space-time continuum, things going on the Earth. But when we find out he's full grown, he confesses there to Miss Marvel that he was the son of Immortus, and Immortus was a reincarnation of Kang in the Marvel comics. From my recollection, he was, I guess, sort of like maybe not a celestial, but he was some reincarnation of Kang there that was from the future, the time traveler. But he was trapped in limbo, and there from limbo, he somehow he intercepts Captain Marvel in her jet and brings her to limbo, and there he seduces her, and that was the whole controversy with Marvel. It's that he used some of his machines to seduce her, and of course the feminists are equating that, as rape now. the controversy surrounding this comic. But as he's explaining this to her, he says, that was my way out of limbo. That's the only way I could get out was, to get you there. And because he impregnated her with himself. And then then she decides she's in love with him. Thor even escorts him back to limbo. But in that whole story there, you see the story of Semiramis and Nimrod. Right. And of course, Nimrod there was, from some of the legends, Semiramis was his mother, and he married her. And then, of course, we have the story that, she killed him, and then she becomes pregnant, and then she claims that her son is Nimrod reincarnated. His name's Tamez. Of course, you see that in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, talking about the women weeping for Tamez over there. So that whole Babylonian legend there is in this comic, the Queen of Heaven, in Avengers number 200.
Yeah. And Tammuz, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And if you look at DC, which sometimes this stuff, is this coincidence? Because Shazam comes out, 3 weeks after Captain Marvel, something like that, right? And it's the same story. It's just now it's an origin story of Shazam, and Shazam is Horus. Because in the comic books, he dates a woman called Isis. It's the same story. Whether she's dating Black Adam or Shazam, it's the same story. It's just giving it to you in different ways. You go and look that up and you'll see what we're talking about. The Shazam in the comics or Black Adam, either one dates Isis. It goes far back. And so the origins of these stories are from the Egyptian pantheon, the Babylonian, and all these other. Every culture has their own version of this. Go ahead.
Now the whole they're using this comic, as a great controversy against Marvel, and that the title of that article was that this Captain Marvel movie redeemed Marvel for having produced this awful comic here in Avengers 200.
Well, what's funny is that Captain Marvel, the reason why they had to keep reinventing her or him or her or him again is because it wasn't popular. It was not selling. I believe when she was a Black woman, it was selling because of the time era and the things going on then. But then that sort of died off. That the popularity of that character. I believe she was even an Avengers at one time. So anyway, then they reinvented, and the reason why they have one of the reasons why they have to push it now through the movie is because they need to make it popular. They already made the movie, and in fact, Rotten Tomatoes, they stopped people from putting up their the people that were designed to see the movie. The ratings fell hard, like to 26% or something like that, and they cut it out. And then, but right before the movie came out, and then only put up the numbers for the people that reviewed actually saw the movie. So the people that disliked it before it even came out, their voice was taken away. They have this movie needed success, and even though domestically it's crossed a certain number, around the world globally it's almost at $1 billion or something like that. But you don't hear anyone really talking about it, So it's not as popular as the Avengers or some of the prior movies, Thor and whatever. So because one of the things is that they are going to make, and I said this before on one of my programs, that watch what they're going to do with Captain Marvel. She's going to end up being this super powerful woman that probably ends up beating Thanos, or whatever the case is, because she's going to end up being the leader of the Avengers. Right.
And that's what I'm surmising, that, a lot of this with the Queen of Heaven may be veiled in this movie, but I think they're really going to bring it to the forefront as her power and project her as, the hero of the Endgame movie that's going to come out.
And speaking of all that, let's speak about how she got her powers in the first place. Marvel, the woman that was working on this thing to bring peace to her planet through stop the war between the Skrulls and the Kree. She made this warp drive, or whatever they called it, and she was attacked by one of the Kree officers, and Danvers at the time shot the core, and the energy from that went into her body and irradiated her with the energy, and they kidnapped her from Earth then. But the point of all of this about the energy is it came from the Tesseract. The Tesseract is a living force, one of the 6 Infinity Stones. So it's the idea of the fusion of opposites, the yin and the yang, and I keep saying this in my shows, the yin and the yang, and all this stuff, all of this energy of the universe, or demonic energy, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same thing, and it's not of God. And so she wields this power because it's fused with her. Again, the fusion of opposites. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And it's going on to, as the movie progresses, we find her there as they've got her, I guess you could say, under their control. And while she's doing that, she has a flash once again as she sees the Supreme Intelligence, the AI there. And as she goes in, she's sort of, I guess you could say, coming in and out of a trance, or I don't know exactly what her state is at that point, but she's definitely in conflict with the Supreme Intelligence. And as she's doing it, and as she's fighting it, she takes off what had been restricting her, the chip that she had there on the back of her neck, that it was, I guess you say, as it was a restrictor of her power. She's shaking it off. And, we have all around us, we're getting as far as the idea that, even this AI could be a god. And that's what they had this Supreme Intelligence pictured as here in this conflict that she's fighting with this god, this AI. She shakes off its restrictions. She shakes off its the power it had over her, and then she becomes all powerful at that point. And that's when her power sort of balloons. Or of course you have that equated to also the Phoenix. And there's another coincidence there, Chris. The Dark Phoenix will be coming out. The same storyline.
Right.
The woman once again becomes a god.
Right, and that's coming out this year, folks, this summer. And yeah, that's a good insight right there, because I thought the same thing. I thought, okay, this looks like the Phoenix as well. And a lot of these comic book movies have sometimes it's very in your face, sometimes it's, you can't really tell. Like Alita Battle Angel, it was a Gnostic story about this woman beating God that was trying to suppress everyone. The god lived up in the city above the city. But anyway, that's that movie. And this Supreme Intelligence was basically playing games, suppressing, and all this stuff. And yeah, I look at it the same way. It's like she's taken off the cords, says, yep. And this is liberation for her to become like a god.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just quoting that over in Psalm 2. That's what it says. The leaders, of the earth were gathered together, and it says, cast off their cords. They wanted to cast off the Messiah or the God cords from them there, and they to be free from his yoke and fight him. And of course, that's exactly what is going to happen there in Armageddon. Mankind is going to finally try to throw off God and go to war with God, and Satan, from the power of the beast, will be leading mankind in that final rebellion.
Exactly. They want to stop the coming of the apocalypse. But speaking of false gods, if anyone knows the name Minerva, if any of you have been in a sorority, you probably wore the Minerva. So Minerva is basically a Roman goddess of poetry, medicine, wisdom, strategic warfare, commerce, weaving, and the crafts, right? In this version, she is warfare because Minerva is a sidekick to can't remember his name right now, but the person that's over the captain that's over Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and she doesn't play a big role in this movie. But I just wanted to point it out that they're always drawing from these pagan sources, occult sources, to give you different characters. And she plays a small part, just a little sidekick warrior type woman. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, she was the Roman's goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare.
Yeah.
So, and that's how they definitely played her up once again, feminine deity, and I guess that's the thing that really, beyond the AI, that's really what stood out to me on this movie. The fact, they were deifying women,
Right.
And not that, and I'm not bashing women in any way, but it's just this movie, I guess, goes to the culture, and as we saw, as all pagan cultures tend to finally go in that, I guess, that direction, that they deify women, they deify the woman.
Yeah.
And from any culture, that seems to be the point where, and almost those societies and those cultures has collapsed as well.
Well, the whole thing about the woman goddesses is it all goes right back to this idea of Gaia. Always goes back to that. No matter where you go, it's going back to that idea of either the earth being alive, and it's the womb and fertility. One of the deities have like 10 breasts on them. So, it's this whole thing about fertility and preservation and liberation. It all comes from this. So I know this idea of feminism, sometimes it's a sensitive issue to talk about, and we always got to, preface, look, we're not talking against women. We're not talking against women. We're not talking, it's become so deep rooted in our culture. We always got to have to preface it. But if people really knows where it comes from, just go back and look into these cultures, and also just look at the Garden of Eden. It's right there. It's right there if you look at it in the right context. But anyway.
And what was the date? What was the opening date of this movie again?
March 8th.
Yeah, I wanted to say that the Romans, this is celebrated Minerva's festival from March 19th to March 23rd during the day, which is called in the Nero Pearl Quinquartaria, the 5th after the Ides of March the 19th. Just goes on to say some more about it. Her, as far as her holiday there, and her worship.
Yeah, well,
her worship was spread throughout the empire.
Yeah, and we know that a lot of these people are also into numerology, so I don't think it's a coincidence that it came out in March. It's timed very well with everything else going on and coming out, so not a coincidence at all. And another one of the aspects of the movie we want to go back to is the Skrulls. And basically what they look like in the movie, and it's like this in the comic book too, but I guess more realistic in the movie, I guess. They're basically shape-shifting elf-like aliens that take on any of the two genders. Doesn't matter. If it's a male spirit, it'll take on a woman's spirit. And it also, that plays into the idea of, gender swapping. It's not, it's kind of subtle in the movie, but immediately I saw it because when the leader, I forget his name, took on his female body, he told the other alien, say, hey, this one's taken.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so don't worry, we're not reading too much into it. This is right there in the movie. And also, going back to Minerva, she called the Earth a dunghole planet, if you know what I mean. You know the word to use. When she was asked if she ever visited Earth. And this is just a reference, for those that don't know, about the country that President Trump referred to as a dunghole country. right? And this caused a big uproar with the left and all this stuff. Whatever. That's just another. I'm just giving you these references because basically what the Skrulls are in this movie. Now remember, they're usually the bad guys, right? And they're usually taking over planets. So these people are refugees on Earth, and they were displaced by the Kree, right? And they play them up as refugees, and Captain Marvel is supposed to find them a new home. Earth is the place that, they come to. They have to hide. They're separated from their family because their family is in this cloaked ship above the Earth, which Marvel, the only, I guess you could say the only good Kree at this point, wants to stop the war and get these people a new home. So you see the whole allegory, the parallel to what's going on in the real world set up in this movie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you bring a great point to light here, that this whole movie, I think you can sum it all up with this theme, is throwing off the labels, from the feminism to the part about the Krees. In the comics, they were always the bad guys. I mean, they were one of the first villains that fought the Fantastic Four in the comics. So they were always the bad guys. Now they're the good guys. And that goes back to the fight once again with the AI there in the scene with Carol Danvers or Captain Marvel there in conflict with the AI. When she goes in there, of course, they start playing the Nirvana song, Come As You Are. And, really, I didn't know, but I knew there was some reason they were playing that song, but I really didn't know why. I went and looked at the meaning of that song, and it says, the meaning of Come As You Are is more philosophical than the other lyrics written by Kurt Cobain. The pureness of the image that we show to the world is a way to live, living outside the boxes and without the need for all the labels that our society imposes to us in a different way to do things. So it's talking about throwing off the labels, and I think that's the whole theme of this movie.
Right. And, but people, if you don't know, I was going to say don't forget, but if you don't know, Kurt Cobain was into Satanism. And another group around that time was 9 Inch Nails. And Trent Reznor is a Satanist, and I can't remember, the other group members' names, but Carol Danvers is wearing a 9 Inch Nails shirt in a big portion of the movie.
They make a big deal of showing that shirt to you as much as they can.
Right. And it's the same thing in Avengers, where Tony Stark is wearing, I think, a Motorhead or Motley Crue, one of those 80s bands, shirt to part of the movie. They keep doing this. In Bumblebee, the movie, I believe the girl wore a Led Zeppelin t-shirt. They're giving you the symbols to show you. And all of these groups are satanic. All of them belong to Crowley in some sort of, Aleister Crowley in some sort of way. When I say belong to him, they follow his methodology, they follow his teachings, and it's basically about do what thou wilt. It's the whole of the law. Do what you want. Everything goes. And that's the mantra that the world is following. That's why we're seeing all this confusion. And I know it's another rabbit trail, but at the same time, it does make sense because they're putting it in your face. Go ahead.
Throw off the labels. We don't need labels. Law. Well, how many states now? You don't have to have the gender on the birth certificate. Or you can have the X on there. We don't need labels. We don't need the pronouns him or her anymore.
Right.
That's what this movie is about, in a nutshell. Yeah. Get rid of the labels. That's where our society's going. Yeah. And that's part of the programming of this movie.
Yeah. Another thing that they put in there is the young woman who's supposed to become another Miss Marvel or whatever.
Monica Rambeau.
Monica Rambeau, the young lady, she points out to Carol Danvers that her idols were Amelia Earhart and Janis Joplin, 2 feminists. And Janis Joplin was into a bunch of weird stuff too. So they're not pulling any punches. They're just not coming as hard as they could. it's a little toned down, but for those of us that know, those of us can recognize it right away. We see it clear as day. And I don't know if you want to say anything else before I go on to the next point.
And I guess that's the part that sort of took me by surprise, with all the criticism of the movie and, talking about how I just thought the feminism was going to be over the top in your face. And then, when it wasn't at to start with, I was like, it wasn't that bad. But then, as you really take and sift this movie, and, the details. And that's why we're on this show. We're not on here, to just to be talking. We want to sift through and, just throwing these ideas, bouncing them off Chris, it helps me to see these things, in a different light as well.
Yeah. And like I said before, it made domestically $330 million. So it is a hit. It's an official hit. Foreign $607 million, a little over $607 million, and worldwide is $938 million for average mediocre movie, in my opinion. I know you might have a different opinion than I, but I think it's an average mediocre movie. Almost $1 billion worldwide, and the Chinese don't even like it. And they say that Carol Danvers is ugly. So, there's a bunch of controversy, I won't go too deep into my thoughts about it. But as you can see, this is not going to stop anytime soon unless we vote with our dollars. And it's not just going to take me. And when I say vote with the dollars, I'm talking about the political issues that they're forcing on us in the comic books, in the movies, in the TV shows. We have to vote with our dollars. But it's not going to take two guys. It'll take a lot more people to turn the tide when it comes to this sort of programming of our youth, because this is, from the way this is written, it's catered not to adults at all, but to teenagers and young adults. So their minds, their intellect aren't fully developed in these areas yet. And so they're easily manipulated. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah, and I can't remember who said this. I'm thinking Hitler, but it may have been someone else. But I remember there was the quote that said, give me your child till they're 6 years old, and I don't care what you teach them afterwards. There's as you mentioned that point in the formative years, if you can get the programming in there. And even the Bible comes that in the book of Proverbs, it talks about, train up a child in the way he should go. When he's old, he'll not depart from it.
Right,
and
right.
On either side of the coin, either good or bad, when you put the programming in, it's going to be there.
Yeah, yeah. And I know some of you might look at this like, oh, come on, it's just entertainment. Oh, come on, it's just a movie. Or it's just a comic book. Or it's just a game. Or it's just whatever. We're not saying this because of our emotions. We're saying this because of factual things, factual documents, history that's out there, but most of us are not going to look in these areas to really find out what's going on. Especially if you're not awakened, through Jesus Christ, or, you're really not going to look. But, this isn't new news that these are gods. People that read comic books that aren't saved, even some of the saved ones, they know that these are gods. Okay? They say the gods are fighting. I watch enough entertainment shows that talk about this stuff to know that they know. Okay? So it's not something that we're making up out of thin air. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here looking at this cover of the Avengers 200. And, what I see on this, I see an android on here. I see a Norse god. I see a mutant witch. Mm-hmm. I see another android creation there, artificial intelligence. I see a revived super soldier. Another form of a super hero that was made with a formula similar to a super soldier serum. I see a flying little man that resembles an insect, but at one time he was a giant man, or I see the Miss Marvel there, the cosmic hero, and then I also see a man of iron. So it's always been there in her face, but it was just portrayed to us as just a comic for kids, but it's always been there.
Yeah. And if this is your first time listening to one of our spoiler reviews, you might want to go back and check out some of the other ones, because if you have been listening to them, you'll see a pattern. We keep coming back to the same thing, and it's I know a lot of them are superhero related, but not all of them. And even in the other genres, you'll see the same pattern. Why? Someone is leading our minds and our thoughts somewhere. Okay, but going back to the feminist aspect, basically by the end of the movie, she confronts the male authority that was over her in the beginning of the movie. And he challenges her to, stop the light show, because basically he's terrified now. He's seen her blow through nukes and all sorts of stuff. And he challenged her that way. And she basically says, I think she blows him back with her photon blast and says, "I have nothing to prove to you." This is right in your face, saying that women have nothing to prove to men. Not that we're asking you to prove anything anyway, but that's the whole thing on feminism. We're getting liberated, and we're going to have the status that you have in authority, right? And so she drags him by his legs across the desert to his ship, and this is the affirmation of her authority and supremacy as a woman, and that's it. So and another part in the movie, because a lot of feminist types out there are offended by everything. So on one point, a guy flirts with Carol Danvers, and I'm not gonna make too much out of this part, but she ended up stealing his bike. But another part in the movie is more obvious, where the black lady, the Skrull, is calling her a young lady. And she gets offended at that. Say, "Call me young lady one more time and see what happens." Something like that, she says. I'm like, how can you get offended by someone calling you young? Like, that's a compliment. Anyway, so, or maybe she thought, oh, well, he's putting his authority over me, calling me a young lady, whatever. But it's just ridiculous stuff. But, that's training the kids, the teenagers, to think in the same way. Right? So go ahead.
And, you can't separate, any of this, from, it all goes back to evolution. We discussed this before the show, that that's where all this goes to, as far as, all the way back to Genesis 3. It seems like this is where I always go on these shows, but it always makes the circle back here that, the lie that was told by the serpent in the garden was that, you should be as God. Mm-hmm. And that's what's portrayed here. She has a godlike, characteristic, and I do believe that will come out in the Avengers Endgame more than it did in this movie. But that's what's being portrayed to us, that, she took off the restrictions, and now she is a god. And that was what Satan told, our parents there in the garden. Yeah. Cast off restrictions and you become God. Yeah. And that's the whole evolutionary process there, that, we're getting stronger and smarter. We're becoming more and more. We were once a tadpole, but now, we are the top of the food chain. Yeah. But, look back in some of the things in history, there were giant skeletons that have been found, a great cover up on that. But, there's something that points to the fact, maybe Adam and Eve were 7 foot tall. So maybe we're not so smart, maybe we're not so strong, and maybe we're not so getting bigger as they will, but maybe we're just getting smaller and dumber, as we're told that, we're really devolving in my opinion.
Yeah, I've heard that before. And for those that don't know as well, when you mentioned Queen of Heaven, That's the Mary that the Catholics worship. That's the Queen of Heaven, and it's talked about in the Bible. This is one of the false gods that the Israelites turned to when they disobeyed God, to have no other god before Him, right? And so I want to give you that key too. Go into your Bible and look up Queen of Heaven. You'll see what I'm talking about. And also with this lie of evolution, this permeates the comics, because the Marvel or DC universe cannot expand without evolution. If you look into any history of the universe of Marvel or DC, you'll see all of these celestial beings, elder gods, and they did this to this planet and that planet to push forth their evolution on the Kree. Their evolution was pushed forth, and they became the Rule, RUUL. And some other, what's the Redskin one called? I can't remember.
It just says the pink Kree were more durable than their blue racial brethren.
Right, and also,
the blue skinned purebred Kree have become a small but powerful minority. There's the elite there, the blue bloods.
Right, and for those of you that don't know, the blue bloods are the elites. This is what you would call the Illuminati, or higher than them. They're not the highest. The council, the round table, these are the ones with the so-called pure Nephilim bloodlines. If you don't know all this, I get it, because it's deep esoteric knowledge. But you should also always think that there's more to this than what you think. It's not just something that somebody came up with that was just out of their own imagination. They drew from a lot of sources, and maybe some of it is their own imagination, but for the most part, what we're finding out is they knew way more than you think they know. Okay?
Before we leave this point of evolution, here is the antiquity of the Kree. It says, eons ago, beings of massive power known as progenitors arrived on Hala, and employed on its population a substance known, listen to this, as prima materia, which served to evolve this population from their primitive form. The planet would eventually be visited by another race of beings who would also experiment on its population.
There you go. And
the brothers coming down.
And this whole idea of experimenting on the population has already been done. It's being done today. And that's where you're getting a whole lot of things going on. And we're talking about pushing the evolutionary envelope here. And the premise is, we're going to make humanity better. We're going to make humanity better. We're going to make your lives better. No, it's going to come down to mutants, literal mutants against a human species. I mean, the Bible doesn't definitively talk about that, but that's where humanity is headed. Especially if you go back and look at Daniel's statue, it talks about iron mixed with miry clay, and they won't mix with the seed of men. Yep. Who are they? Think about that. Who are they? Right? And people are going to give you different objects, but I say just do some deeper research. It's not tech. That's a part of it, but it's not tech. But anyway, going back to Genesis 6 again, the evolution and the labels, and they're pushing humanity through these stories to basically reject Jesus.
Right.
I know a lot of people that want power, young kids, teenagers. They love this stuff. They eat it up. And, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, they have a lot of interest in interviews and things to say regarding, the influence on humanity, right? And they knew what type of influence they had. They say it in their, at least Stan Lee did. He said it in his interviews, and like he said, great power, great responsibility. That writing power that he had, he knows.
Right, and that comes, that was the quote from Spider, the origin of Spider-Man, and he was one of the greatest examples of this. He was the teenage kid. He was bullied around, by his classmates. Flash Thompson, they all bullied him, and then there he was bitten by that radioactive spider, and suddenly had great power. And that was part of the whole conflict within himself. He wanted to show the world his power, but he had to keep his identity secret.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and good comic, I guess. These stories are fascinating. And we're gonna be, I don't know what the next one we'll review, but there's a lot coming out this summer. Avengers Endgame, and we'll be on that probably sooner than we were on this. And we're gonna come back and talk about some movies that we didn't get to talk about, Spider-Man and stuff like that. Hey, this is our decoding of Captain Marvel. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you later. If you like our videos, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to get all our frequent updates.